So hi everyone, it is wonderful to be here. I've been talking with Pauline and Charlie about this network that they were starting and asked if I would talk with you all. So it's great to see it happening. Myself and a few colleagues have started something similar here in the US for law school mediation clinicians and others to gather. It started at COVID when kind of we all had clinics that couldn't mediate anymore. And we've continued serving as a very similar resource for each other. So it's great to connect with colleagues all over the world. So as Pauline mentioned, I am the director with our Center for Dispute Resolution here at the law school within the University of Maryland in the United States. And I also teach a mediation clinic. And so I'm going to highlight a few things that I think in particular may be different from how structurally things are organized and operate here at American law schools, so that you can just kind of understand, some of that context. So when we say clinic at a law school, we're talking about a credit-based professor taught experiential opportunity where students are actually engaged in the legal practice. And so it's not like a clinic where something set up like a business or a nonprofit kind of serving the community. Students may be doing work in those areas, but when we say clinic within a law school, we're talking about a course that students enroll in, taught by a faculty member, where they're actually engaging in the practice of law or in the context of mediation in the actual role of a neutral third party. Our center does operate kind of more broadly than that, welcome, where we do a whole variety of a lot of the other services. I think similar to what you've said, sometimes we pull in students, sometimes that's just run by our staff. And that is more like a nonprofit type center. And so just want to kind of put that forward. So I'm going to share my screen here. Let me get it set up. All right. So are you seeing the big screen? Okay, great. All right. So again, I'm Toby Guerin. I'm going to talk about the mediation clinic here at the law school. And so you're seeing the full screen. You're not seeing my notes. Are you seeing the notes?
No.
Okay, great. Okay. So the clinic, as I said, it's a credit-based, and I'll talk a little bit about that. It's an experiential course, faculty supervision, and it has both a classroom component, like the typical kind of meet for a class, and then the practical component where the students are applying the skills. And the American Bar Association, which is our accreditation entity, indicates the minimum number of hours that students need for the types of number of credits that they're getting. So we do have a structure in which we have to kind of operate. There are opportunities for students to get experience kind of without faculty supervision or in non-credit-based formats. They're just not called clinics. And so that's what I wanted to kind of clarify. So at Maryland, Pauline gave me some things that she wanted me to really highlight for everybody. So in general, to be a mediator, right, there's a variety of different requirements that are determined, and a lot of what the students need to do depends on where they're going to be mediating and the requirements of that entity. So every student is going to need to get trained to be a mediator. That training, at least in Maryland, is 40 hours, but in other states, it may be more, it may be less. They often have to go through an apprenticeship where they're observing or being observed by others. And then they actually engage in mediation and then have continued education and ethical requirements. So in Maryland, these are the things that are needed in order for people to be mediators. And then the clinic has to also build in those requirements for its students since they'll be mediating. So at our clinic is set up, so our law school operates largely in 2 semesters, the fall semester, which we just started last week, and the spring semester. The mediation clinic here is 1 semester, so we operate in the spring. We have 8 students, and our clinic has 1 faculty member, myself, and 1 part-time staff attorney who helps with the clinic. We meet in that classroom component once a week for 3 hours. And then all of the other hours, right, is fulfilled by students engaging in clinical work, which is related to mediation outside of the class. And so our clinic is 4 credits. So that means that students over the course of the semester will complete 180 to 192 hours of clinic work. At Maryland, our clinic students do get a grade for their work, and they do have to engage in an apprentice process. So we do have to get our students the ability to observe, and then they're observed by faculty, and then they mediate with each other. We use a co-mediation model. So in the apprentice process, our students are actually co-mediating with faculty or the staff attorney. And then once they finish the apprentice, then they start mediating with each other. So that's kind of the broad structure of the clinic. The students get their mediation training because the clinic is 1 semester. They actually take a class right now in the fall semester called Mediation Theory and Practice Seminar. And in that class, over the course of the semester, they get all the training they need to be a mediator. So there's about 20 students in that class. They all get the credential training to be a mediator. And then 8 of those students continue into the spring and have already received their training. The seminar meets our state court rules for mediators. So don't know if you have any courts or government agencies or other kind of just general requirements for what mediators need, but we make sure our class meets those needs. The apprentice process is observing those 2 mediations, co-mediating with faculty twice, and then they mediate with their peers and are observed by faculty. And so that's really what makes a clinic in a law school different from another type of environment, because faculty is very closely involved throughout. So I'm gonna get into kind of the types of cases that we mediate, and then share some information on a survey that we did about mediation clinics throughout the United States to give some information about different ways that clinics are structured. So I'll pause right before I start that to see if you all had any questions. So the types of things that we mediate. So I do want to be very clear, it does not need to be involved with courts in order for us to do the mediation, but because we have an hour requirement for our students, and because the clinic at a law school is designed to give students direct practice experience, we do need to develop a steady stream of referrals through partnerships to make sure that our students do get the experience that they throughout the clinic. And so the most reliable place for that referrals is through our courts. So we do a lot of other things on a case-by-case basis, but the majority of the matters that we mediate come from the courts. So we do what would be called general contracts, usually under $10,000 or less. We do debt collection matters. We do all sorts of landlord-tenant matters. We do workplace discrimination complaints and housing discrimination complaints. So those are the majority of the types of cases that we handle. Our formal partners are with the District Court of Maryland, which is our lowest level court here in Maryland, kind of what we call small claims matters. They tend to have the landlord, tenant, and general contract, those kinds of things. And then what's called our Office of Equity and Civil Rights, and that's the agency of the city that handles complaints about workplace or housing discrimination. So we do have partnerships with them. I'm in conversations now with courts in a different part of the state to handle probate matters. So these are contested wills or other types of situations that might occur regarding an estate after somebody passes away. So we'll see if we can get those started this year. So those are the general types of cases that we handle. So the next slide I'm going to get to talks about the broader clinics throughout the country, but I wanted to just take a moment and pause and see if you all had any questions before I move on to that broader description of clinics in the U.S. Okay, great. If they come up, you can go ahead and put it in the chat or whatever you'd like to do. Let me get back to sharing my screen. Great. So just like Pauline mentioned about maybe gathering some information, that's exactly what we did this summer. Is we put out a survey about different mediation clinics. We did limit our survey to law schools. We wanted to focus on law school mediation clinics. So they were only for mediation clinics. So we know that there's other types of alternative dispute resolution, but we are keeping to mediation clinics. And we were keeping the responses to law schools because we really just wanted to know what is happening. We were very lucky. We got 38 responses, which we were really happy with. And we asked people to respond about clinics that were currently in existence or clinics that used to be in existence. We learned that of the respondents, 4 of them have worked with clinics that are no longer exist at their law schools. 36 were U.S., and I think the other 2 were Canada. So that's kind of who responded to the information I'm going to share. So what semester is your clinic on? So we see that here, the majority of clinics, 53%, are offered both in the fall and in the spring. And so it's not clear whether in the way the question was worded, whether that means the clinic is offered all year or is offered each semester. So if it's offered each semester, that would mean that new students can register kind of each semester, or the same students stay throughout the entire year. And then you'll see that it's fairly evenly distributed, with the least amount offered over the summer, which is very common. There's most faculty don't want to teach over the summer, and students are often doing other things in the summer. We also ask people, how many credits do students get for their clinics? And remember, the number of credits is also connected to the number of hours that students need to provide for their clinic. And so you'll see that the majority is somewhere around 3 to 4 credits. And so that leads me to believe that even those people that responded that their clinic was the full year is probably offered 2 separate semesters. And those students that are getting 6 or maybe 8 credits, those are likely those year-long clinics because that's a lot of time for one semester. So that's kind of generally how the credits distribute. And so for the number of students in the clinics, we see that most of them have 7 through 12 or 13 to 18 students. So that clearly is a good 75% of the clinics have that number of students. And so again, right, if we offered twice a semester, for example, for me, if I offered my clinic in the fall and in the spring, and I had 8 students in each, then I would have 16 students over the course of the year. So again, survey design, if you were going to do it, clarify whether those things. And then you can see how the rest plays out. 19 to 24, in my experience, is very high for a clinic in the way that we were structuring it with credit-based and faculty supervision. So the other thing we wanted to know is, how do our students get the mediation training, right? And clinics do this in different ways. So some students enroll in the clinic, and then through their clinical experience, they receive the mediation training. So that's one way that it happens. The other way that it happens is that separate credit-based course, and that's what I described that we do here at Maryland. In the fall, the students would take a course for credit that gets their training, and then in the spring, they actually take the clinic. We asked if any students take a non-credit course, right? So maybe some other place where the training would be offered, that the students receive their training not for credit, and no one said that they do that. And then the majority of clinics are doing what's called an intensive right before clinic. And so at Maryland, our clinic used to be a year long, and we used to use this intensive model where either students come for a week before classes, or more often 2 to 3 days, where they just spend those 2 to 3 days kind of getting about 24 hours or so of meetings and training as a way to really get them starting their clinic experience already with some of the training or all of the training complete. And then there were others, and I don't see the details of the others in my notes, so I couldn't say exactly what that was. So the types of cases, the types of matters that are mediated are really varied. So as I said, because the students are engaging in clinics and they have to do mediation, engaging in the practice, a lot of the partnerships are with referral sources that are going to be fairly reliable. And so that often is the courts. And so that's why you see small claims and landlord-tenant being the 2 highest types of matters. That said, when it comes to landlord-tenant and even small claims, a lot of the clinics are pushing to try and get those matters before people go to court or before they even file in court. A lot of the centers also have received requests for mediations just generally from the community. They may have partnerships with the EEOC, which is similar to that employment and housing discrimination. They may partner with city or municipalities. A few do the child access and custody in the family area. 2 do appellates if you are appealing a matter. And then this is the child welfare and child in need of assistance. So these are family structures where the court is trying to determine whether the family can continue to have guardianship over the child, or if the child needs to be removed and under what conditions and how that might work. So that's what that So I did list the others here, and they tend to be much more specialized, right? Special education, something inmate civil rights. So working with the prisons, international abduction. There's a few that have partnerships with the State Department, and then elder mediation and protective orders. So I don't know if these types of matters kind of correspond to types of issues that you all would consider mediating or already are mediating. It gives you a sense of the variety that exists. And so if you've got somewhere between 7 and 16 students, you have to make sure that they get matters, they get cases to mediate, right? So some are going to be getting the referrals, some are going to be going to court and trying to do those mediations on the day of trial. Some of them, the partner is going to set up the mediation and they step in. They happen in different ways, but you can see that 9 of the 36 responses are handling 51 to 75 cases a year. A handful, one is doing 100 to 150. I really don't know where that's a lot in my experience. 5 are doing 76 to 100. And so you can see where it plays out in the number of cases. And it may also correspond to the number of students that they have, right? So this is an aggregated result. I didn't go in and break it down, if you have 5 or fewer students, how many cases are you doing and so forth. The students, the clinics are structured really differently. So in most of the clinics, the students serve as co-mediators. Right? And so that probably means mediating with each other, mediating with faculty, or mediating with another experienced mediator. So that's the majority of them are doing that. The students in over half of the mediations also serve as observers, and that often is part of the learning process. And often, at least in our clinic, when students aren't mediating, right, we do open it up for their peers to observe, right? Because in our clinical environment, it's learning, it's giving feedback. We know no 2 mediations are the same. And about half the students serve as solo mediators. They're mediating on their own, often with faculty supervision. But most clinics, ours included, there are instances where, although we prefer the co-mediation, sometimes students will serve as solo mediators. And some have a formal or informal apprentice before they can mediate on their own. And that may be imposed by the clinic, or it may be imposed by the partner that they work with that apprentice process. So that's kind of the information that we gathered on. We may at some point do things again. I did put in a proposal with a colleague of mine to present at the on kind of mediation clinics and the different structures at the ABA Dispute Resolution Conference. And I may be reaching out to this group. We'd love to have somebody from the international context either join us in person, or maybe we can video you in to share some of these similar things internationally. So I'll be in touch for sure with Pauline and Charlie and see if you all do a survey similar to what we did, and see if we can get you all to share your results and hear about how clinics are structured, not just in the US, but outside of the US.